Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about paper, watercolour paper. Now watercolour paper comes in three types of surfaces. Rough, which is a very textured surface, cold press or not, N-O-T, which is a medium textured paper, and hot pressed or HP, which produce a very smooth finish, ideal for botanical watercolours or where fine details are needed. When we talk about papers, we talk about the weight of the paper. Now, this one on the left is just plain copy paper, which is just 70 grams per square metre. The one on the right is a slightly stiffer copy paper, which is 150 grams per square metre, or 72 pounds. Now, why do we use watercolour paper? Why not just use copy paper or any paper that you can find? Well, I'm going to show you. With watercolour, you need to put on a lot of water with the pigment, and you need to be able to move the pigment around. Now, what happens on very thin paper is that it cockles. That means it gets buckled. And you get lots of kind of marks where it all screws up, and your paint, your pigment will run into those bits, and it will never ever straighten out. Even when it's dry, it won't straighten out. You can see on the back how it's cockled. This one is a slightly heavier paper, and so it possibly won't cockle as much, although it still looks pretty awful on the back. And the other thing, you need to be able to put multiple layers of watercolours on the paper. So it needs to be a good strong paper. Now this is just a kid's sketchbook. So just the sort you'd buy for your kids. And this is why you don't want to use this sort of paper. As you can see, actually before I even put anything on it, it's a very thin paper. It's possibly about the 70 gram weight. And it's already cockled, so when I put water on, it's only going to get worse. And this sort of paper tears much more easily than watercolour paper. Papers come in a variety of weights or thicknesses, and they're measured traditionally in imperial pounds per ream, which was 500 sheets of imperial size paper. Now, today we find metric weights as well, which are grams per square metre. So 72 pounds is quite a thin watercolour paper, that equates to 150 grams per square metre. This one is a Bockingford range by De La Rowney, and I'll talk more about that range later on. So this one is quite a light paper. As you can see, it's quite flexible, but I wouldn't really recommend that weight. Next, we have in the same range a 90 pounds or 190 grams per square metre Bockingford. So you can maybe see, it's hard to see on film, but that one is slightly thicker. And then finally, this is 140 pounds Bockingford, or 300 grams per square metre. This is the weight of paper that I recommend. It's probably the most easily available weight in watercolour paper. And here I'm going to lay them all side by side so you can see that the texture is slightly different on each. And I'll try and give you a close-up of that in a moment. Still very difficult to see the difference in texture on video as opposed to actually holding the paper. So that is the Bockingford range with De La Rowney, which unfortunately they have discontinued, and I didn't realise that till after I had made the video, so I apologise for that, but I will be showing you some other papers. And De La Rowney are now doing a range called Aquarelle, which has kind of superseded that one. So this is also by De La Rowney, and this is called the Langton. I think this is slightly more expensive, and this pad is again 140 pounds in weight. It's a mould made watercolour paper. It's cold pressed, and so it has some texture. A nice paper again. Very easy to lay a wash on these papers. And this is another one in the same range, also by Daler Rowney. And what I wanted to show you here was the difference in different sorts of pads. All watercolour papers should be acid free. That's something you really got to look for, but they all should be acid free. Now this is a block as opposed to a pad of paper, is glued on all four sides. So it means you don't have to stretch your watercolour paper, and it's like having a piece of wood. Whereas this one is a spiral bound pad, and each sheet is very separate. Not so easy for tearing out, which this one is easier. This one is glued on one edge and then has a fabric binding, and those are the easiest ones to tear out. So I was saying here that both of these are Daler Rowney. This one is another block as opposed to a pad of paper by Canson. This is Montval, and this is also £140. And this one is again glued on all four sides. And there's a little place just there where you can put your knife or ruler to pull the top page off, which is always a help. Most satisfying bit at the end of a painting. Now this one is the Daler Rowney Aquarelle block, and this one I bought because it was 50 pages, which I thought was really good size, and it was actually quite good value. This is a cold pressed, not NOT paper, so it's a slightly finer grain, but it still has a nice finish to it. And I bought this one mainly for doing illustrations and a few sketches. It says you can use it for pencil or watercolour. Again, it's acid free. Now this one is my favourite. This is my kind of Bentley of papers. I wouldn't say it was a Rolls Royce, but it's definitely the Bentley. And this is Archer's Aquarelle, and it is a French make, and it is £140. They do heavier weights as well, but this one is £140. It's a beautiful paper. This is again on a block, so glued on all four sides, and there's the little space to separate the pages out. I love this one. I do find with the bigger sizes of pads that as I get towards the end, they do come off the cardboard backing, but this is great paper, really lovely paper. It's a cotton rag content paper and very, very nice. And this is a different size of the Archers. In fact, that first one I showed you was a hot pressed, so it was a very smooth paper. This one is the cold pressed. I do prefer the cold press. I prefer to have some sort of texture. Now this is one I've just bought and want to try out. It's a practice paper made by the Society for All Artists, and I bought this because it's £140 in weight, very reasonably priced. It was in the sale. It was 100 sheets. Doesn't come in a pad, just comes as separate sheets. And there's 100 sheets, and it cost me £26, which I thought was really reasonable. So as I said, it's brand new, very heavy package of paper. This is quarter imperial size. Feels nice, and I'm going to use it specifically for trying out different things because it was quite reasonably priced, and for classes and things. So I'm going to show you a wash on this, and I'm going to show you one on the Bockingford. So nice smooth wash. Just trying one with a couple of colours to see what happens. And I feel that this paper is cheap enough to be able to play with and try things out on. So now I'm going to do the same with the Bockingford. Now I wouldn't use my Arches paper for trying things out like this. I would only use that for proper finished artwork. So I wouldn't even use it for sketches. It's too expensive. When you're starting out, you really want to get products that are reasonably priced but that do the job. Now, remember, this was the typing the copy paper, and certainly don't recommend that. So now I'm going to try putting a second coat on and also showing you what happens when you wet the paper. So here, I'm just drawing something on the top. So that's probably not such a good test as actually doing another wash over the top, which would make the paper kind of tear. So now I'm doing the same with the heavier copy paper. So I'm going to do the same little sketch on each. Now we'll come to the kids' book. You can see how that has really cockled, really crinkled. And of course you then get pools of water, pools of pigment in the wrinkles. So if you're going to spend your time doing a picture, you want to have a good base on which to do your picture. So just a little tree and some grass at the base. And I'm just drawing a sphere here and trying to do some shading on it. And don't worry, because this is just to show you how the paper reacts. In other videos, I will actually show you how to do washes and other techniques. Just adding a bit of water to shade that, which didn't really work at all on the copy paper. Now I'm going to talk about sizing, and that doesn't mean the size of your paper. Watercolour paper is thicker and heavier than lots of other sorts of paper, and it needs to be in order to be able to withstand multiple layers of washes. In order for these washes to flow, to move, you need to be able to move your paint. The paper must be sized. Gelatin is usually used either during the manufacture or afterwards. It can be dipped in. Now, word of warning, sizing can go wrong. It can degrade over time, in which case your paper comes like blotting paper. Here is an example. This is a sky. Now, I knew as soon as I put the water on the paper that this wasn't going to work. And it didn't work in a couple of places, down here at the bottom and also at the top. Down at the bottom, didn't matter so much. At the top, completely ruined. I knew this as soon as I started it, but I wanted to do this picture, so I just carried on and lived with it. So obviously this can't be a picture for sale or anything, but I just enjoyed the process of doing the picture, so I didn't mind too much, which just shows that the process is more important than the finished article. Right, this is a Daler Rowney sketch pad. It's not meant for watercolour. It's the Lyndhurst sketch pad, but I do use it for doing my sketches of anything, just objects that just taken at random. Now, I know that it's going to buckle, it's going to cockle, but I don't worry about it because it's not finished pictures, it's just for fun. So it doesn't really matter. So if you want to do watercolours in a little sketchbook, then, you know, go ahead, but don't do pretty finished pictures. That's all I'm saying, but you can still enjoy using it. Now, if we look at this, you can't really tell from here, but the paper is slightly, I don't know how you say that, the content of the paper has come up and peeled off a bit. So it's just not really the right paper to use. You can erase on it, but the tooth of the paper gets damaged quite easily on these sorts of very cheap papers. Whereas a watercolour paper, you can erase, you can add more layers, you can scrub the paper, and you can even scratch out at the end. You wouldn't want to do that at the beginning. Now here I'm trying to see if I can lift off some pigment. It depends on the pigment that's used, whether it's a staining pigment or not, as to whether you can lift pigment after it has dried. So to do it, you need to add a little bit of water and then just kind of scrub a little bit. Try not to damage the tooth of the paper. And then you come along with some paper towel and just dab it. And you see it has come up. There is still a stain, but it is quite slight. So let's try this with the other paper, the copy paper. Now I'm scrubbing. All that's happening is the tooth of the paper is actually coming up, but no paint has really come off. Trying a bit harder. It would eventually go into a hole in this paper, which it wouldn't do on watercolour paper. Now I know that I have got a red kind of background to that one, whereas this one is a pale blue, but the green was the same, so it should have come off, but it didn't. And I'm going to try it with the Bockingford, which again is watercolour paper, so it should work. So just a clean, wet brush and a little kind of scrubby motion just round in a circle. Obviously a larger patch would be more difficult, but you can just scrub off small patches and see there again it has come off. Probably better on the practice paper than it has on the Bockingford. But maybe I didn't add enough water. Yeah, it's about the same really now. But certain pigments you can't pull off, like indigo blue, and I think Viridian is another one. So it depends how staining the pigment actually is as to whether you can pull it off. Now, so far we've talked about Daler Rowney, which is a UK company making paper. Another UK company is Winsor & Newton, also Saunders and Waterford, St Cuthbert's Mill. Arches is French, Canson is from France, Fabriano from Italy, Hahnemüle from Germany, Strathmore from the USA. These are all very, very manufacturers of watercolour paper. I will list more details down below. Thank you for watching my video. Please like, share and subscribe. Bye!